To make the chicken and mushroom pie, I'm going to start off with diced onion and carrot going into a pan. I chop them up at home, put them in together to bring them in, and they're going to cook out for probably about 5 minutes. So we want to get that quite high to start with, give them a good sizzle. Just give it a little stir every now and then, but you really do want to see some colour coming on the onion and everything getting a bit softened. Once your carrot and onions have cooked enough, you can see they've got a bit of colour on them, the mushrooms are going to go in. It's up to you how much you put of each ingredient. I've got quite a lot of mushrooms here, but they do shrink a lot. So again, that's going to take probably about 5 minutes cooking time. And just give them a stir now and then. When the mushrooms have cooked down quite a bit, they give out a lot of moisture. So you're looking for quite a dry mix at this point. Next thing to go in will be the diced chicken. I'm using chicken thighs, and I think there were about 6 in there. So, usual technique, stir it about until they brown, and then we're going to leave them cook for a few minutes. So that's taken about 5 minutes to cook the chicken so far. Now obviously it's going to cook in the sauce, it's also going to cook in the oven, so if there's a few pink bits, it doesn't matter at this stage. Now if you're making your own sauce, at this point you would sprinkle flour in, give it a good stir and mix that in well. You then add your milk and cream if you were using that. In mine, I'm going to use the quick method and use the tin of condensed soup, and condensed means it's really, really thick. That's going to go in. Now, depending on how many ingredients you've used, if you've got lots of chicken, for example, you may need some water, milk or cream added into it. If you like a thick pie filling, you might not want to add any extras into it. So at this point, I'm going to turn it down a little. You might also want to add chicken stock cube, that's up to you. You could use, instead of the mushroom soup, you could use a chicken soup. So you can hear now it's really calmed down, it's not sizzling anymore. I'm also going to add in some peas and some fresh thyme. Now, fresh thyme comes as little branches, little twigs. You can put it in whole and fish them out later, or you can just strip off some of the leaves and it gives you a really nice mellow flavour. So I'm going to leave that to cook for a few minutes. Now this is looking quite thick, so I put a little bit of cold water in the can, swish it around, and then just add in a little bit of liquid. Now I'm going to leave it fairly thick. You can see my big piece of thyme in there. I'm going to fish that out before it goes into the pie tin. So that will give out quite a lot of flavour. Before it goes in your pie tin, you're really going to need to taste it. See if you want to add that stock cube. See if you want any salt and pepper. Just to make sure before it goes under the pastry. So my finished pie filling now is going to go into my tin, and that will give it a few minutes to start to cool down before I top it with the pastry. Now it's up to you if you had 2 or 3 or 4 smaller pie tins. This is quite a full one, so it means the pastry isn't going to sink into the middle. So pastry comes out next. I unrolled it. I'm going to sprinkle it with a little flour, and I'm going to dust that off because it's a little bit sticky when you first unroll it. I'm going to flip it over onto a clean table and dry. It's more to the point, not just clean, otherwise it would go like glue. a little bit more flour, and it just gives it that little bit more homemade look. So once I've done that, I'm going to slide that out of the way and get my filled pie dish. And I've got some beaten egg. You can use water for this. If you haven't got a rim on your pie dish, you need to make the pastry just sort of sit on the filling. So obviously if it's quite full, it's a bit easier to do that. Now the traditional way, we would put a strip of pastry around it first to stick the other pastry to. I'm just going to go with the one layer. And if you have excess pastry, obviously you can use that in another recipe. I'll just do some quick puffs or something. So that goes on top. Cut it square rather than rectangular, and then I'm going to press it around the edge just to secure it, using a smooth edge of a blunt knife, and then going to trim the pastry. And you can hear I'm cutting against the tin. So if you get any ragged edges, you go back over them and you're cutting down, rubbing it against the dish. I'm then going to crimp the edges a little, just use the back of the knife and pull them in. The success of this does really depend on what the edge of your tin is like. If you've got a foil one, it doesn't always work so well because they're already a bit crinkled, and if you haven't got an edge to your tin, just don't bother. This would work well as individual dishes, especially for an exam. You could serve them separately without having a mess. I'm going to egg wash it. You could do this with egg and milk, just milk, doesn't really matter, just to give it a nice bit of a shine when it comes out of the oven. Now when this goes in the oven, once the pastry looks cooked, it's done. So it shouldn't really take more than about 20 minutes in a hot oven. It's about 200 to 220 degrees. And the last thing I'm going to do is to cut a little vent to let any steam out, just to make a hole in the center. That's going to sit on a baking tray, especially if it's really full like mine. You might find it bubbles over a little, just to catch any drips. So 20 minutes later, this is what it looks like. You can see and hear that it's crisp. It looks really risen. It has bubbled out a little, which is why the tray was there. But that's how you know it's cooked. It's golden, puffed and crispy.